Om Shruti Shruti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Nama Pranavathaya Ruddhajnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gaining this Atmajnanam is as difficult as walking on the edge of a razor blade. If it is such a powerful thing, if it is so beneficial, the benefits are infinite. How come it's so difficult? Why is it like a very difficult secret? Why are people not able to grasp it? These are very common thoughts that come to everybody's mind. Something which is so beneficial, one would imagine that everybody will want it and everybody should be able to get it. And yet only very few people even make an attempt at gaining this. One problem is that it is just knowledge. And this knowledge is contrary to a lot of things people have determined to be the truth. Determined perhaps should be in quotes. Most people have got some ideas in their head, and these ideas are reinforced by everybody around. That is one starting problem. Therefore, very few people even look for this. We have to look at what we really want. Whereas in normal conditions in the Jagat, what we want is dictated by what looks like immediate gain. More and more, humanity is looking for instant success, instant gratification, instant, everything is instant, including coffee. They want it here and now, and without making an effort. That seems to be the guiding principle. But how can we get this with overcome these problems? Plus, Shastra tells us that unless you understand what Shastra is trying to tell us, you will never get it. There is no other source for this information. You cannot process information based on all the inputs you get from the senses. Shastra says you have to have, therefore, that word Shraddha. And the Shraddha has to come through our own analysis of what can be the right thing. That Shraddha is simply not blind following. That is faith. It is a much deeper analysis and understanding of what a pramana is, why something is a pramana for a particular type of knowledge, and how does the pramana work. All that has to be understood. And in this process of gaining Shraddha, there can be many problems, many obstacles. And an element of doubt persists. I already think I know a few things. Although I come to Shastra, to a guru, and I'm willing to sit and accept what the guru says, there's an element of doubt in the mind all the time, including for Arjuna. What if this is not right? What if my assumption that Shastra is a pramana is not right? It is not an assumption. It's something which you verify and validate through sheer logic. But one can get these doubts. The doubts get also multiplied because initially when we start studying, Shastra talks about certain things which are so against what we think we know that we find it very difficult to accept it. Then there is also our own preparation, our own stock of punya, which prevents this. Having overcome all this, it is still not very easy to see. Till one makes a switch, and then you recollect Swamiji's words, this is clear as daylight. That day will come. With the light of the day will be thrown upon us. But one must have so much Shraddha that one continues to constantly listen to what Shastra has to say, contemplate upon it, let it constantly go around in the mind, and come a day when clarity emerges. Already Shastra has said this is a sukshma jnanam. Knowledge which is not like knowledge of mathematics, for example, or statistics, or any science, or even a pseudoscience like psychology. Calling it pseudoscience because it is based on a large number of observations, which is what science does, from which you draw certain commonalities. But the factors which influence the human mind are so large that very difficult to come up with a clear pattern. Why mind? Even the body is not the same. The same medicine does not respond, one body does not respond the way the other body responds. Although we have studied physiology in such great depth. This knowledge is so sukshma that Shastra says gaining this is as difficult as walking on the razor's blade edge. And this word sukshma, for which I'm not even using the substitute subtle, has also to be clearly seen. What is a sukshma? So after the last mantra, Acharya looks at this and says, the next mantra simply says, the nature of Atma is like this. What is the connection? That connection Acharya brings about by looking at this subject itself, saying, why is it so difficult? What makes it different from the kind of knowledge we can get elsewhere of other objects? So why is it so subtle? Why is it so difficult? So taking off from the last mantra, Acharya gives a small introduction to the next mantra. So can you put that on, please? Tat Katham.
Tat Katham.
How is that? Tat Katham, what? Tat here is what? That it is so difficult. Sukshma. It's so difficult, as difficult as walking on the razor's edge. How? Tat Katham. Ati Sukshmatvam.
Ati Sukshmatvam.
Yeyasya ityuchyate.
Yeyasya ityuchyate.
How do you understand this Ati Sukshmatvam? To understand this, what is the Sukshma and how do we've done quite a bit of work on the Sukshma. Acharya takes it up. And he says, to understand that, it is said, Stula Tavadiyam
Stula Tavadiyam
Medini Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandho Pachita
Medini Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandho Pachita
Sarvendriya Vishaya Bhuta.
Sarvendriya Vishaya Bhuta.
What is Sthula and what is Sukshma? Sthula, what is tangible? Tavad Iyam Medini. Medini is Prithvi. Prithvi reflects all the five senses. That Medini, Iyam Medini, Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha Upachita. All are available in the Prithvi. Prithvi can be tasted, smelled, seen, touched, felt, all of them. So this Medhini, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, Upachita, which is fraught with, which is endowed with all of these properties, Sarvendriya Vishaya Bhuta.
Sarvendriya Vishaya Bhuta.
We read that. It is available for all senses. Sarva Indriya Vishaya, being the Vishaya for all the Indriyas. Sarvendriya Vishaya Bhuta, like the Sharira. The Sharira is also like that. We say, it is a composition of the Panchabhutas. Therefore, we say that once the body has to be discarded. The physical body goes back to those 5 elements, Panchabhutas. It doesn't matter whether the body is burnt or cremated or whatever you do with the body, or you just let to rot. The body goes back and breaks up into the 5 senses, 5 elements. Every element can claim the body. Prithvi can say, mine. I don't care whether you burn it, bury it, it has come back to me only. In some form, it has to come back to me. So can all the other bhutas. Dust turn to dust. Everybody can claim the body. In fact, even while the body is alive, everybody can claim the body. The parents can claim the body. All the relatives can claim the body. Siblings can claim the body. The country can claim the body. Anybody can claim the body. Not even yours. It is only yours as long as you think, I am the body. But really speaking, the body doesn't belong to you at all. It is composition of the 5 elements and has to go back to those 5 elements. So the body goes to each of those elements because it has all properties. Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, Upachita. Endowed with all of these. These are the properties of the 5 elements. But what happens? The Sharira is also exactly like that. But Acharya very beautifully from there takes up. He says, Tatra
Tatra
Ekaika Guna Apakarshena
एकैक गुण अपकर्षेण
Ekaguna
Gandhadinam
गन्धादीनां
Gandhadinam
Sukshmatva Mahatma Vishuddhatva Nityatvad
सूक्ष्मत्व महत्व विशुद्धत्व नित्यत्व आदि
Adi
Taratamyam
तारतम्यं
Taratamyam
Drashtam
दृष्टम्
Apadishu
अबादिषु
Yavad Akashamiti.
यावद् आकाशमिति
Yakashati
There, Prithvi has all 5 characteristics, all 5 guna, available to all the 5 senses, as is the Sharira, available to all the senses. There, if you look at the Prithvi, Tatra, there, Ekaika Guna Apakarshena. As you look at other elements, there is reduction of one guna, step by step. Remember this whole sequence in the model is that Akasha is said to have appeared first. And Akasha's characteristic is Shabda. And where did it come from? From the Vastu, Brahman. And this, in turn, along with the Brahman, because Brahman is the Adhisthana for everything. Akasha by itself can't do anything. There is no question of Akasha producing anything. In the presence of Brahman, with Brahman as Sakshi, Akasha is followed by Vayu. And Vayu exhibits a characteristics of the Akasha, because come from Akasha, which is Shabda, sound, also exhibit an additional property of Sparsha. And together with Akasha and Vayu, with Brahman, with the Vastu, emerges Agni. Agni then possesses the Shabda property, also possesses the Sparsha property, and has an additional property of sight. It is the first time we see a form, Rupa. And these three elements together with Brahman then produce Apaha, waters, which then carries forward those properties of Shabda, Sparsha and Rupa and has an additional property of Gandha, smell. And all together lend their property to Prithvi along with its own additional property of, sorry, I've made a mistake. Apa is not Gandha, it is Rasa. And all four together, along with Gandha, smell, is Prithvi. So it says Prithvi has all of them, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, Upechita. Then if you look, keep going backwards, Eka, in sequence, Guna Apakarshena, Gandhadinam, it reduces one at a time. Sukshmatva, Mahatva, Vishuddhatva, Nityatva, Adi, Taratamyam. What happens? Each one has one less property. Look at the principle. If you have property, then all the property, then you're the grossest. So this most thula. Like the Tikakara, Anandagiri says, Yavad Gunapachaya Tavat Taratamyena Saukshmyam Drishtam Prithvyadishu. Yavat Gunapachya Tavatena Saukshmyam Drishtam. So as the properties, characteristics reduce, it's less perceptible. And that is what defines Sukshmatvam. So here also, Prithvi is there. Apa has one less characteristic. Therefore, it is Sukshmataram. So he says Gandhadinam Sukshmatva. And also, it is also the Karanam for Prithvi. We looked at the sequence. Ultimately, for everything, there is only one Karanam. That also is not ultimate. That also we reject eventually. But for understanding this, what is this Sukshmatvam? We stay with the Karanam of Ishvara. Maya Sahita Brahman. Saguna Ishvara. And say that everything comes from that one source. But there is a sequence that we have understood. So there is Mahatva. Mahatva is Karanatva. What becomes more pervasive? Vishuddhatva is less contaminated. Every guna means there is some contamination. and nityatva is therefore more permanent. These are relative. Sukshmatva, mahatva, vishuddhatva, nityatva, adi, taratamyam. Taratamyam is relatively higher and higher. So starting with the Prithvi, which is a sthula object, each one reduces because each progressively is available to one less sense. Therefore, it is sukshmataram. Therefore, it says taratamyam drishtam ab adishu. Ab is what is? Apaha. Yavad akashamiti. All the way through Prithvi, Apaha, Agni, Vayu and Akasha, less and less accessible. Less and less available to senses. Therefore, sukshmataram. Therefore, mahatvataram. Therefore, vishuddhatvataram. And therefore, nityattvataram. All comparative only. Each one is more sukshma than the other. Ap adishu yavat akashamiti, till you reach akasha. So, by the time you understand akasha, you've already come to a very sukshma. That's why akasha is often used as an example in many cases to exemplify that all-pervasiveness. Therefore, we use space as an example. So one is trying to build up this whole case to show why that vastu which you're seeking there is no comparative, it is not a sukshmataram, it is sukshmatamam. There is nothing after that. Te gandhadayah.
Te gandhadayah.
Sarve eva.
Sarva eva.
Stulatvat vikaraha.
Stulatvat vigarah.
Shabdhantaha.
Shabdhantaha.
Yatra na santi.
Yatra na santi.
These properties, gandhadaya, which is the fifth property that earth, Prithvi exhibits, gandhadaya, that it is the sthula and therefore more vikaraha, subject to more and more change. Any property if you have, it is subject to change in the form of decline. Kshaya will happen. Change will happen. You can imagine anything which has a property has to undergo change because the property will undergo change with time. Sometimes with location also. So every object that we know of has to undergo vikara. And this chain that is taking place from Prithvi to Akasha, Shabdantaha. In the Shabda, there is less and less and less, only one quality. In Akasha, Shabda is the only quality. Therefore, Akasha cannot be compared to the others in terms of, can be compared and say it's Sukshmataram. And that kind of sthula abhava, yatra na santi, in Akasha, By the time you come to Akasha, sthulast, if you want such a word available, is Prithvi. And slowly become less and less and less sthula. The sthula characteristic reduces. By the time you come to Shabda, yatra na santi. There's very little sthula stum left. If you accept sthula as the opposite of antonym for sukshma, then what is left in Shabda is very little of sthulatvam. And we are saying that all of these, Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha, Prithvi, everything, what is the Karanam, what is the source? Vastu. Brahman. What about that? You've already reduced these elements of which everything else is in the Jagat is made up. By the time you come to Akasha, because each one by turn is a Karanam for the next one. Each one is Sukshmataram, each one is purer, more pervading. What about that which is the universal source of everything? Kimu
किमु
tasya sukshmatvadi
तस्य सूक्ष्मत्वादि
niratishayatvam
निरतिशयत्वं
vaktavyam ityetat
वक्तव्यम् इत्येतद्
darshayati shrutihi.
दर्शयति श्रुतिः.
What to talk of that which is the only karanam for everything. Each one by gradation we've seen is sukshmataram, 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 because it is less and less and less accessible to senses. And by the time we come to Kimu, what indeed, what to talk of? Tasya sukshmatvadi niratishayatvam, tasya, of what? Of this vastu, which in the previous mantra is very difficult to understand, as difficult as walking on razor's edge. Say, this is sukshmatva adi, sukshmatvam, mahatvam, vishuddhatvam, nityatvam, etc. In terms of these, what to talk of this? It is niratishayam. It is absolute. And to show this, ityetad darshayati shrutihi. To show how and why you call this, which is the karanam for everything, as being absolutely sukshma, unsurpassed sukshmatvam. Sukshmatvam means sukshmatvam adi. Sukshmatvam, mahatvam, vishuddhatvam, nityatvam, etc. How do you describe something which is not available to your senses? We don't know of any other way of doing it. It is the most sukshma and therefore most difficult to recognize and to understand. Therefore, tasya vastunaha sukshmatvadi niratishayatvam vaktavyam ityetad darshayati shrutihi. To show this, Shruti says what is the nature of this vastu which we're trying to understand. So he brings this to what this particular mantra says about the vastu. And he said the way to understand this by first understanding why it says it is difficult to understand. Because it is sukshmatamam. All these other things are karya. And you keep going back, and come to this absolute Sukshma. Each one is difficult to understand compared to the previous one because one less sense can access this. By the time you come to trying to understand Atma, no sense can access it. Indriya Atitaha. We've heard this. It's not accessible to any of the senses. And therefore Sukshmataram, and therefore extremely difficult to understand. Amazing. And what does the mantra itself say? Ashabdam,
Ashabdam,
Asparsham,
Asparsham,
Arupam,
Arupam,
Avyayam,
Avyayam,
Tatha Arasam,
Tatha
Rasam,
Nityam,
Nityam,
Agandavacha,
Agandhavaccha,
Yat.
Yat,
This, which is not all these, we'll talk about this. Anadyanantam,
Anadyanam,
Mahatah Param,
Mahata
Param,
Dhruvam,
Dhruvam,
Nichayatan Mrityumukhat Pramuchyate.
Nichayatan, Mrityumukhat Pramuchyate.
You can look at the Anvaya. Yat is there at the end of the first line. Yat Ashabdam Asparsham Arupam Avyayam Arasam Agandhavat Tatha Nityam Anadyanantam Mahatha Param Dhruvam Cha Tad Nichaya Mrityumukhat Pramuchyate. Pramuchyate is our verb. From where do you get freed? Mrityumukhat Pramuchyate. Then who gets freed? Tad Nichaya, one who has determined Nishchayena through a process of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Nichaya itself is that. Nichaya actually comes from Chai Dhatu. To worship, to know, to understand, etc. But here Nichaya means Pakka, Nishchayena. How? How can you get that? Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Wherever you go, Shastra will tell you that is the way to understand this. Repeated Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Till all the first Shravana to gain what is the Shastra saying? Manana to remove all the doubts and contradictions that we will experience. That's why, when we first start studying Shastra, a lot of things get churned up within. A lot of things come out. Many things which we made assumptions of. So that Mananam process clears a lot of things. But it still doesn't tell us the nature of that knowledge, for which we saw the other day in the other class. Nididhyasanam becomes paramount. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasanam, Nichaya. So that somebody who understands this very clearly, with absolute certainty. Understand what? Nichaya, mrityumukhat pramuchyate, tad nichaya. Nichaya what? Doing, understanding what? There, the rest of the mantra says, that which is yat ashabdam, asparsham, arupam, avyayam, arasam, agandhavat. That which is not accessible doesn't have any of these. No shabda, no sparsha, no rupa, nothing. That which doesn't have any of these things, therefore is not accessible to anything. How does the eye see? Needs rupa. How do the ears hear? Need shabda. That's the only thing the ears can do. And if something is ashabda, rupa, asparsha, etc., how are you going to know it? Nichaya. To know that vastu, which is not only this, it is anadyanantam, anadi anantam. What is anadi anantam? Yasya adina vidyate. Yasya karanam nasti. Everything we know has a beginning in time and has a karanam for it, from which it evolves, including all that we know about ourselves. Yasya na adihi na vidyate. You can't see a beginning because there is no karanam. Sa anadi. In fact, in Tamil and many of the languages, we call somebody anadi when he or she has no living parents. And the meaning is the same. Their adi is not visible. But adi has to be there. You cannot be in this jagat without a karanam. But for them, the karanam is not visible. Parents are not there. Therefore, na vidyate adi karanam yasya saha anadi. Not only the anadi, it also says anantam. Same kind of definition of anantam also. Yasya antam na vidyate. You can't see an end, you cannot see it transforming into something else, into another product. Yasya karyam na vidyate. Anadi we said, yasya karanam na vidyate. Here, yasya karyam na vidyate. Therefore, when you take the two together, anadischa, asau anantascha, anadyantaha, tam anadyanantam. Similarly, the word nichaya, nischayena jnatva. How do you nischayena jnatva? You have to go through the process of shravana, manana, nididhyasana. Nichaya, nischayena jnatva. So, when this vastu, yat vastu, which is ashabdam, asparsham, arupam, avyayam, etc., has been clearly understood by that person mrityumukhat pramuchyate. There is no more death for that person, because what is the understanding you have? Understanding is that asabdama, sparsham, etc. is I. Then there is no question of being born or being or dying away. That clearly belongs to the Sharira. And when the person is clarity is beyond doubt and recognizes oneself as the Vastu, which is all these, has to be negatively only said because it has no properties. Otherwise, normally, how do you describe something? By its properties. A tall tree, a wise man. You will describe the property that you can recognize. There's nothing here. Therefore, it has to be through negation, saying nothing is available. And when that person recognizes himself or herself as that, there is no more individuality left. There is only Chaitanya Swarupam. And Chaitanya Swarupam means what? Anadyanantam. No Adi, no Anta. And he uses two other words. Mahatav Param. Mahatav Param. Mahat we saw earlier in one of the mantras. Samashti Sukshma Sharira called Hiranyagarbha. Prathamaja. Param. Tadapi Param. Mahatav Papi Param. Which is the cause for that also. Which is the adhishthanam for everything. And which is Dhruvam. Dhruvam is fixed, no changing. Like our Dhruva Nakshatra. Because that stays unchanging on the sky. That Dhruvam, changeless. What can change? Only when there's a property will there be a change, no? Only the property can change. Today, a person is 65 kilos and he stops doing any form of exercise. Tomorrow is 75 kilos. Property changes. Buddhi can start to go down. A wise man can become a not so wise man. A knowledgeable man can become not so knowledgeable. I am a standing example. I can tell you before 2010, I knew a lot about technology. People used to come to me for help, consult on computers, software, hardware. Today, I'm completely out of sync. I have to go to youngsters and say, please help me with this. Change. Things have overtaken me completely. So everything will change. As property changes, things will change. A tall mountain will change. I mentioned this earlier. I read in my geography book in school that the Himalayas is still growing at 3 inches per year. So some change is taking place, although it looks unchanging. Of course, other changes are taking place. It's getting more and more trash into it because people are trying to climb and dumping all kind of trash in the Himalayas. Change is taking place in the properties. So that which has no properties is Dhruvam, Mahatav Param, Anadi Anantam. That Vastu is I. When that clarity comes, not in terms of the words that you read, but in terms of the assimilation of that knowledge. And this is where the switch has to take place. Till that time, I'm saying I, the person, the individual with an individual buddhi, has to absorb this knowledge. In that buddhi, which is the upalabdhi sthanam for this knowledge, in that buddhi, he has to understand. Understand what? I am that vastu which is ashabdam, asparsham, etc. Buddhi has got all of that. Buddhi is sparsham, buddhi is recognizable. That buddhi also has to go. How do I understand this? That I, which is making the struggle to understand this vastu, as a vastu which is asparsham, etc., etc., that vastu is there. And that vastu is I, aham. That vastu is called Brahman. Aham, that Brahman, aham Brahmasmi. The individual transition from the individual to samashti and then to eventually to absolute is the knowledge. Individual drops, samashti also drops. What is left is I. And that I is ashabdam, asparsham, arupam, avyayam, arasam, ityadi. This knowledge is called aparoksha jnanam. I cannot impute that to this sharira, this brain, this. There is no individual brain. The moment I impute it there, I'm again restricting my thinking. I'm not able to grasp not even the totality, forget about the absolute. So this transition from vyashti to samashti to that one ekameva advitiya vastu, which is not a third person vastu, it is uttama purusha, I, has to be understood that way. And therefore it is sukshmatamam, not readily graspable. There is no property for you to grasp. Therefore, nididhyasanam. Having cleared all the doubts and having made sure that I know what I am not. What is anatma? Which anatma includes my body, mind, sense complex. And then to figure out I, the Atma. That exercise of nididhyasana has to tell us how to do that. Nididhyasana is nothing very strange. It is pure meditation, ekagrita. But instead of only Ishvara, at which stage we are only looking for Ishvara's grace, that ekagrita on Ishvara. Kevalam eka agre asti. Ekagrita. We transit from there and start looking at the Shabda, the whole knowledge only Shabda. and take that Shabda and get into that kind of contemplative mode. There are many things available for us to do that. And when we attend Shravanam, a lot of these come our way. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Jivo Brahmaiva na Paraha. What's that saying? What is the meaning? What is Shastra trying to tell us? Shastra is only telling us about I. That is why it's a pramana for I. It is the subject matter of the Shastra. No, Swamiji, you look at Karma Kanda, there is no I there. There is only instruction, do this, don't do this. You're right. That instruction is necessary to get to the stage where you can even think about I. Following that instruction is necessary. Many times people have doubts. Swamiji, does that mean that I should not work towards earning wealth? No, Shastra is not saying don't earn wealth. Please earn wealth. Does that mean that I should give up my children and my wife? No, Shastra is not saying don't give up all of that. But he's saying, please understand what is it that you want. It goes back to that one shloka which I personally have felt touch me deep down. Parikshalokan karmachitan brahmana. Examine these and say, what is it that you want? Vedamaya akritat kritena. How am I ever going to get this which is not obtained by doing anything? Only one way. Tad vijnanatham gurumeva abhigachet. Samitpanihi shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Go to Guru, do Shravanam, 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 Mananam, Mananam, Mananam. And eventually, when ready, get into a state of nididhyasanam, for which preparation is to do meditation, to know, understand how to get the chitta ekagrata and change the subject from, to begin with anything material, to Ishvara, to Nirguna Ishvara, to I. What a beautiful system for a subject which is extremely difficult to understand. The whole system is laid out in the Shastra. That's why he says, Tad Nichaya, one who's understood that. Nischayena Gyatva. The nature of I has all of these things, whole 1.5 lines of not this, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this. Not accessible, not available. Not available to time. Trikalatitaha. One who understands that with clarity. Nichaya, having understood that, Mrityumukhat pramuchyate. Gains absolute freedom. Bhashyakara has taken this up. What looks like a simple mantra, but something which one needs to think carefully about. We will look at what Bhashyakara says on this tomorrow. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om